nobody doing it better. Y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick that, relax, the Team WS.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Sit Down Morning Show with Malik Wright, presented by the Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Malik Wright, joined by my co-host, as always, Daniel Alameda. And as always, it's Fantasy Football Fridays here for the Right Way Sports Network. We'll be joined later on the show by TWSN football analyst Michael O'Hara. Steve won't be joining us today on the show. Wish him the best on his exam. But we got a lot of stuff to get into. Before we jump into all of that, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Daniel, I think I'm going to start off in San Fran.
Yeah.
It seems like when it rains, it pours. I feel for Kyle Shanahan. It seems like the team is frustrated by losing. It seems the team is frustrated by egos. Marissa, roll the clip.
What happened with Devondre Campbell? He didn't play and he went into the locker room at some point?
Yeah, he said he didn't want to play today.
Play today?
Yep.
The coaching staff?
He did when I asked him why he didn't want to go in. So.
During the game or before?
No, that was in the third quarter.
Devondre opting to not go into the game. What do you need to do to ensure that you don't lose the rest of the locker room?
I haven't lost anybody. That's somebody who doesn't want to play football. It's pretty simple. I mean, I think our team and myself, we know how we feel about that, so I don't think we need to talk about him.
What does management think after seeing that? Does this say more about Devondre Campbell and not being a pro? Regardless, let me be very, very clear. I am in no way, shape, or form blaming Kyle Shanahan for Devondre Campbell's actions. Devondre Campbell is a grown-ass man. He could do what he wants, when he wants. He let his team down by letting his ego get in the way of things. However, does this speak to a larger issue of Kyle Shanahan not having a great hold from a leadership standpoint on his locker room? I don't know. I am not judge, jury. But Daniel, I really want to hear what your thoughts are, because you think about the 49ers season. The 49ers were expected to be a Super Bowl contender. They've been anything but that this season. Things have gone haywire. And much like the Cincinnati Bengals, they were facing a lot of off-the-field issues, whether it be contracts, people being upset, the whole 9 yards. And you had that report come out that the Niners brass is putting pressure on Kyle Shanahan. I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on this situation? What does this say about Kyle Shanahan? And more importantly, what does this say about the San Francisco 49ers moving forward?
I think the 49ers are a team that they're imploding right now. And I think that their season is pretty much over when we talk about playoffs. So they've got to fight for something bigger than the playoffs. They've got to fight for the future. They've got to fight for continuing to build on their culture. And hopefully this doesn't take a massive turn south. And I don't think that this is the turning point for the 49ers in the sense that it's all blowing up, right? I think that you look at what Kyle Shanahan said, and it would be different if nobody else was speaking about it. But George Kittle went, in his post-game press conference and said, that dude is, not what we talk about when we talk about 49ers football. You look at Charvarius Ward saying the same exact thing, saying that dude is going to be cut tomorrow. I think the sentiment around the entire team, George Kittle even said, I've never been around anybody that's done what Campbell did yesterday. You got to fight for your teammates, and he quit on his team. And I think that Kyle Shanahan is getting saved by that, right? I think that there is definitely some underlying issues with this 49ers team that I'll get to in a second. But this Devondre Campbell thing is a one-off in my opinion, right? I think that this was himself. When you see the players speaking outright against him, that's something we haven't seen all season long. And then when you go and look at what the rest of the season looks like for the 49ers and what everybody else is saying about the 49ers, Malik, their playoff chances are pretty much done, right? They're 5-8. They basically have to win out. Their playoff chances are basically done. And you see people on social media not necessarily bashing Kyle Shanahan, not necessarily bashing Brock Purdy, but this is taking the story out of the 49ers. This is taking the story away from what the actual issue with this 49ers team is. And it's just them not producing. And I look at what Brock Purdy's done recently. He's been an atrocious quarterback recently. And then you go look at Deebo Samuel, right? Deebo Samuel would have been the story on everybody's front pages if this Devondre Campbell thing didn't happen. And the Deebo Samuel thing was earlier this week. He posted on social media saying, hey, I'm not struggling. I'm just not getting the ball enough. And what happened, right? He got the ball and he had a couple of key drops. And then in the post-game press conference, both George Kittle and Kyle Shanahan said, hey, that was a pretty big drop. That would have definitely led to a touchdown, and we definitely needed that one. So I think this team is just in over their heads, and they're just not a juggernaut anymore. And it's almost like when you look at the past couple seasons, this 49ers team was consistent. They were winning at the line of scrimmage. They were winning at the point of attack, but now they're just getting out physical. Then I think that the age is slowly starting to catch up to them, because when you look at the 49ers offensive line, even 2 years ago, it was strong, but it wasn't a top 5 unit. Then last year slowly started getting injured. And this year, Trent Williams has been dealing with injuries. So this 49ers team, they've got themselves, and it's almost kind of funny. We'll talk about the Bengals in a little bit, but they've got themselves at a little bit of a crossroads this year, right? And what I mean by that is, what's your future? Brock Purdy's coming up on a contract extension. Are you going to pay him that massive contract of $40 million a year? Or would you look elsewhere? Because I believe that's what Brock Purdy is going to command, right? I think Brock Purdy is going to command more than a Sam Darnold. And I think that there is a real possibility where you have to ask yourself if you're the 49ers. And we've seen the story play out before, right? The 49ers went to a Super Bowl. They lost in the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. The organization and Kyle Shanahan realized, John Lynch said, hey, we need to go out there and get a quarterback that's got this, extendability that can, make plays happen outside of the structure. And they went up in the draft and drafted Trey Lance. So for me, a team that showed their cards before, saying, hey, we're not just going to settle with a average game managing quarterback. Who's to say they don't do that again this year with Brock Purdy or next year with Brock Purdy? And I think for me, that's where this conversation starts. I think that Kyle Shanahan should be on the hot seat, but I believe, and this is a little bit of a change for me from earlier this season, because I was a huge fan of Brock Purdy. And I think Brock Purdy is a game managing quarterback. I think he's of the same tier, a little bit below that Jared Goff-esque quarterback. I believe that the Brock Purdy decision is going to come before the Kyle Shanahan decision. And I would be, I struggle to see how they don't have an actual conversation about, is it Brock Purdy or is it a draft pick / Sam Darnold for our future at the quarterback position? So I'm curious to see what they do this offseason, but I really think that they're going to have that conversation. And I don't think it's a shoo-in that Brock Purdy is the starting quarterback come 2026. So that's just the 49ers season at this point is kind of lost. And I think you start with the quarterback position, and then you have to retool your offensive line, because we talked about their Super Bowl window. Team Super Bowl windows are typically 2 years long. And after this year, Christian McCaffrey is about to be 30 years old. Trent Williams is not going to be a top 3 left tackle. On the game that the play that they got the end of the game, Jared Verse destroyed Trent Williams, and Trent Williams looked a little bit slow. So I think he's dealing with a serious injury right now, and this entire offensive line looks slow. They got to retool the offensive line and the quarterback position. You got to have that conversation about Brock Purdy, because I don't know if I see them paying him more than $25 to $30 million a year for 3+ years. I don't see that.
I think the situation is just unfortunate the way everything has unfolded, from Brandon Ayuk's injury to the off the field stuff that, for contracts, that kind of like hurt their season, morale before it even started, right? I really believe that definitely played a part for a lot of teams this season. But I'm curious to see what Niners brass thinks, what happens going forward, because no doubt this roster is going to have some turnover. And regardless, you can't have players giving up on the team, quitting on the team, and thinking it's about them or making it about them. But we move on. If you guys do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Daniel, I want to get to something interesting, man. Let's talk about the AFC. The 7th seed is an interesting spot this year, right? The 7th seed of the AFC, who is it going to come down to? You got teams in the hunt, right? Teams like the Bengals, right? Albeit by the slimmest of margins. You've got the Broncos, you got the Colts, which is interesting because, and you got the Dolphins too. The Dolphins have a weird schedule, right? They got the Texans on their schedule. They've got the Jets on their schedule. And they've got the team we just talked about, the 49ers on their schedule. The Colts probably have the easiest pathway. And I sit up here and I say easy. No team is really easy. Of the Broncos this week, I think they still have the Titans, right? They've got the Jaguars. That's their schedule, right? Then you look at the Broncos. The Broncos have a brutal schedule moving forward. That's assuming the Kansas City Chiefs play their starters. They might not. They might play their backups. And even then, the Kansas City Chiefs still can put points on the board. But I look at it, and the Broncos have the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Colts, and the Bengals left on their schedule. Daniel, I really want to get your thoughts, man, because I think this is interesting. Who do you think actually comes out and is going to be the 7th seed in the AFC?
Man, this is tough. I think that, man. So what I will say, let's talk about one team at a time for me. The Colts.
Mm-hmm.
The Colts are a team, I think that they're a sneaky dark horse team. But when you look at their schedule, and it seems super easy, Malik, they struggle against the Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
It's a divisional matchup, and they do. When you look at the past 6 games, the Colts have won 1 out of the past 6 games against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So when you look at that's the last game on the schedule, and you say, well, the Jaguars got nothing to play for. We've seen the story play out so many times to where a team's about to get into the playoffs, and then they lose to a team that's not even fighting for anything. I think we saw this with the Colts actually multiple years ago. I believe it was 3 years ago, to where they were fighting to get in the playoffs, and then they needed one more win, and the Jacksonville Jaguars come up and play spoilers. So that game's not a shoo, and I think the Colts could easily lose that game. And then this week, you got the Colts facing the Broncos. I think that the Colts realistically could lose this game on the road, and they just got to lose 2 out of the next 4 if we're talking about the Bengals. So I think that easily the team that has the best chance, I do think it's the Denver Broncos. I think the Denver Broncos are in the best possible position when we talk about the remaining schedule, as well as the fact that you alluded to that last game. I think that that's going to be the one that kills the Bengals' playoff chances potentially, because I think that there is a world where I looked at the Steelers schedule, I looked at the Bills schedule. There is a world where the Chiefs are sitting pretty come week 18, and that would be the biggest concern when you look at the Denver Broncos schedule. But the Broncos schedule is tough. The Los Angeles Chargers, you just look at what, they did against the Kansas City Chiefs. They played them close. They played them down to the wire. The Chargers are a team, I think that they could easily beat the Broncos. So if I had to put my prediction cap on and what team I think and what's the ranking for these teams, I think that it's the Broncos comfortably ahead. And then I do say, and it is kind of crazy, I would put the Bengals above the Colts. And I think that it's just the state of the Colts right now, and the fact that the Colts do have to win 3 out of their next 4. So when we discuss the two teams, Bengals winning 4 out of the next 4, Colts winning 3 out of the next 4, I think the Bengals are right there. And then the Miami Dolphins, Malik, their schedule's too tough for me. I look at it and say, hey, they got to win 3 out of their next 4 at least, but their schedule is brutal. They're coming off a game with the New York Jets, albeit a divisional game, but it went to overtime. They easily could have lost that game. So the Dolphins have the Texans, Browns, Jets, and the 49ers. I don't see them winning 3 out of those next 4. So I really do think that this is a race between the Broncos, Bengals, and the Colts. And the beautiful thing about this, Malik, is the next 2 weeks, we see these matchups. in the next 3 weeks, actually, we see these matchups. Broncos, Colts this week. So if I had to make a prediction, like I said, I think that this is going to come down to week 18. I think that that's what we're going to come down to. If I had to make a prediction, I think that the Colts could win against Denver this week. And I think the Bengals could beat the Broncos, but I really think it's going to come down to week 18. We're going to be talking about, well, the Denver Broncos are facing a Colts team or a Chiefs team that isn't playing their starters. And then the Bengals are playing a Steelers team, potentially, that might not be playing their starters. And then the Colts are playing a Jaguars team that they should win, but it's a divisional game and they could slip up. That's my prediction. I think week 18 is the week that decides. And I think that all three teams are in the race come week 18, except for the Miami Dolphins.
I'm going to do something a little weird. We're going to get back to the NFL talk, Daniel, I promise. But I'm going to switch it up, Marissa, here. Let's bring Mike in for fantasy football right now. I experienced a little bit of technical difficulty right now on my headset. But if we can let's bring Mike in now, talk fantasy football, get through that, and then we'll continue with the show. Mike, appreciate you, man. Thanks for joining us, brother.
Morning, guys. How we doing?
Doing good. Listen, man, it's Fantasy Football Friday. You're riding it solo today, brother. It's solo for you.
It's all good with me, man.
Yes, sir. Daniel, I'm going to let you get into it.
For sure. So, Mike, we talked about this yesterday, right? And I want to get into these. We got week 15, and we got the playoffs for a lot of people, not myself included, but this is the week that really is going to kind of set the tone for people in money leagues, for people in home leagues. What's your thoughts, first off, on, how to win in the playoffs come fantasy football? And also, let's get into your starts and sits for this week.
Yeah. So first off, first step is don't start anyone from the game last night. Keep those guys out of your lineup. I'm glad we didn't talk about that game yesterday when I was on the show, because I would have looked like a real asshat just talking about all these guys and how they're going to do so great. And then they all fell flat on their face. I mean, Puka Nacua with like a respectable 14 points and 13 points out of Kyron Williams, but a total disaster last night. What a way to start off the fantasy playoffs. But really, I mean, it's all about not playing it safe. You really got to shoot for ceiling outcomes. I talked about it a little bit yesterday when I was talking about not really liking Jacoby Myers' outlook this week. Like, that's just a real floor-based play. You have to shoot for the ceiling and shoot for the 99th percentile, because it's win or go home at this point. You're not really playing to just make the playoffs. You're playing to take it all down. So you have to let's say you're in the flex. You're deciding between someone like Jacoby Myers, for example, or Christian Watson. Christian Watson, he's going to get those downfield targets. I know the Seattle secondary has been strong in recent weeks, but he gets those looks in the end zone. He gets the looks downfield. You just have to shoot for ceiling outcomes when you're with those fringe guys. So just playing to win and not playing to get by is really what you need to be doing here. And that's the mentality you should take on. And another thing that I'll add on is don't waste roster spots with like depth pieces. Your bench should be full with handcuff running backs, like guys like Blake Corum and whatnot. Zach Charbonnet, I know he's probably already rostered, but those handcuff running backs, and don't be rostering like a fifth wide receiver or a backup quarterback unless you like absolutely have to. So yeah, use your roster spots wisely and make the ceiling based outcome, or make the lineup decisions that are based on the ceiling based outcomes.
For sure. And once again, anybody in the chat, if you guys have any fantasy football questions, we got to some yesterday, drop them down below. We're going to get to them, throughout the fantasy football segment. And we'll just start off first with our guy, Sean Brennan. We talked about Njoku yesterday, but if we're going tight end, Mike Gesicki, David Njoku, with what we know injury-wise, who would you go with?
Yeah, so it's really looking like David Njoku's not going to play. The Kelsey Conway, Mary Kay Cabot, not Kelsey Conway. She said yesterday that David Njoku, the expectation is basically that he's not going to play. And Mike Gesicki, that's a tough option as well. We've really seen him like reduced to a rotational player in these last couple of weeks. Last week on Monday Night Football, dropping down to a 37% route participation. So he's running less than half of the routes out there in 2 weeks in a row. That's not the kind of usage that can sustain fantasy relevant production. I'd be looking for someone else on your waiver wire. If there's no one else out there, I mean, you can pray for a touchdown for Gesicki. We know his large frame can be used in the red zone and in the end zone. So
Mike on the Mike Gesicki train. Let's go. We finally converted him to a Mike Gesicki believer. Let's go.
Well, I do think there's better options out there, but if you're just chasing a touchdown
Relax.
because of a quality offense and a guy who can be used in the red zone, I think that's fine. But yeah, the running 40% of the routes just isn't going to get it done fantasy wise.
For sure. So let's talk about some of your week 15 starts and sets real quick. Who would be one of your biggest starts for this upcoming week?
Yeah, it's gross. No one wants to admit that it's a good start, but it's Adam Thielen. He's the oldest wide receiver in the NFL, and he is still doing exactly what he did last year. He's winning routes out of the slot, and he's drawing targets at an incredibly high rate. He drew 34% of the targets, 32% of the targets last week, which was the highest single game mark for any Carolina wide receiver this season. He's accounted for 26% of the targets across the last 2 weeks, and he has as sure of hands as ever. 80% of his targets have resulted in catches over the last 2 games. So he's been absolutely sensational. He's playing that safety blanket role for Bryce Young, and Bryce Young's recent quality play is just another significant boost for Adam Thielen's week-to-week outlook. And last week, he put up nearly 20 fantasy points against a really, really strong Philadelphia secondary. He'll face off with Jordan Lewis this week in the slot against Dallas, who is the weak link of this secondary for the Cowboys. So I would feel more than okay starting Adam Thielen this week.
I love it. And then we got one last one for you real quick. And just to add on, Adam Thielen has also been an elite connection with Bryce Young dating back to his time last year. So I think that's a surefire play. I love that one. Give me one guy that you are staying away from this week or saying, hey, this guy, code red, you can put him in your lineup, but don't expect a lot.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 names real quick. One's Jared Goff. I know that he's always kind of on that fringe QB1 appeal, and the game environment, it's really solid against the Bills. A 54.5-point total is ridiculous. I don't know for sure, but that's got to be pushing for the highest game total of the season so far. So it can be appealing, but the way to attack the Bills is on the ground. I know they gave up a lot of yardage through the air to the Rams last week, but that was their first time giving up more than 240 passing yards since week 6, and they ranked 26th in yards allowed per carry. So you attack the Bills on the ground. That's the best way to do it. They run a bunch of too high looks to keep the big plays contained. So I expect Dan Campbell to be more than okay riding David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs to get there in this one. And with Jared Goff, realistically, just given the quality of their rushing attack, you really need 3 touchdowns in a given 3 passing touchdowns in a given week for him to get there and deliver a top 12 performance. And I really just think that Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson are going to be more than fine leaning on their elite running back duo in this one. And another guy who I've said this the last couple weeks, you can't bench him, but you should really temper your expectations for what you're going to get out of Alvin Kamara this week and really for the rest of the fantasy playoffs. This has been a long time coming. People who have been following closely have seen this. They're going to start shutting down Alvin Kamara to some degree. They just signed him to an extension. He's aging. This is the biggest workload he's ever seen in his career, and the season's lost. I mean, like record-wise, they're not eliminated, but I mean, come on, it's going to be Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler, and they've got 5 wins. So yeah, the season's essentially over. They're going to start getting looks to Kendre Miller. We saw him take 11 touches from Alvin Kamara last week. And last week was Alvin Kamara's lowest rush attempt share of the entire season. He was just over 50%. So they're starting to rein it in with Alvin Kamara and looking forward to next season with the veteran running back and getting some of the younger guys looks. So I really think we need to, he's not that upper echelon top tier guy that we had throughout most of the season. It's time to realize that he's a low end fringe RB1. So you start him, but just be prepared if he's not as strong as he has been throughout the season.
For sure.
Mike, I want to thank you so much for joining us, man, for another fantasy football segment for Fantasy Football Fridays. As always, man, I wish you and your fantasy football teams the absolute best. I hope that you enjoy this weekend's action. We'll be catching you the week after next. We'll be in Florida next week, so there will be no sit-down morning show, no State of the Jungle, brother, but we're looking forward to catching back up with you.
I'll catch up with you guys soon.
Yes, sir.
Have a good one, guys.
You as well. That was Mike O'Hara. Make sure you guys give him a follow on social media, on all social handles. And while you're also here, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live. We view this channel as your one-stop shop for all things sports. Want to head back up to the NFL, though. Let's talk about Brian Daboll. Daniel, do you think the Giants should rethink their commitment to Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll? A lot of Giants fans are pissed at the results. The stadium seats, or empty seats, I should say, speak to that. The bags over the head speak to that. The Giants faithful is no longer speaking with the utmost confidence anymore. The once excited Giants and being pumped up for a new change, a new voice is now grown a little bit stale. And now it brings up the question, Daniel, do you think the Giants brass, the Maras, do you think that they should rethink their letter to the fan base earlier from a few weeks back, where they talked about their recommitment to Brian Dable and Joe Schoen for the future?
Well, like at 2-11, you have to. Like, that's my thoughts on this, New York Giants team. I think that when I look at them, my biggest concern with them is you are 2-11. Your season is down in the dumps. For whatever, you decided, whatever you looked at your team and said, hey, this is a playoff caliber team. Daniel Jones and company, we went to the playoffs 2 years ago, so we can just run it back, and we're going to be good this upcoming this season. And you went from a team that made the playoffs to a team that was 6-11 to a team that is 2-11 right now. Like, they have to reconsider it. And I'm not saying that they need to be gone now, but at 2-11, I'm going to be honest. If you don't win another game the rest of the season, they got to go. How can you look at yourself and you look at your team and say, hey, this was a team that was 2-15, 3-14, and we're just going to run it right back with the same GM and the same head coach? I just don't think that that's the pathway to success. I don't see a quarterback walking in here this offseason and changing the franchise. I just don't see it. I don't see Shador doing that. I don't see Cam Ward doing that. And when I look at how a team is going to survive with the same exact regime, you need some sort of bolt of energy. You need some sort of life with your team. And I just don't see that with the New York Giants. Like I said, Daniel Jones is gone, so you got to figure out who's your quarterback. And when I look at the GM, Joe Schoen, what has he really done when it looks to, provide a future for this New York Giants team? I like the Brian Burns move. I thought that was good. I like how they built up the defensive line. I like how they've allocated resources to the offensive line. The Malik Neighbors pick was a solid pick, and that's going to age very well because he's going to be a superstar in the league. But I'm going to be honest with you, I just don't see how this New York Giants team, if they can survive, if they end the season extremely poorly, how the rest of the season's going. I mean, you just look at what they did this past week. You mentioned the fans with the bags on their heads. That's a very serious, that's a real conversation with the fans. You look at, they lost a 3-point game to the New Orleans Saints, a game that they should have won. These are games that are winnable games that you have to give confidence to your organization, to your coaching staff, to your players, and to your fan base, and you're just not doing that. So the New York Giants, they need to go through a serious retooling, and I just don't see how the Brian Dable and Joe Schoen can really rebound from a 3-14 type season. So it depends. Let's see how the rest of the season plays out. But the way it looks right now, if they lose, 3 out of their next 4, that's kind of the benchmark. If they have a top 2 pick, go 3-14, I would seriously consider saying, hey, let's get these guys out of here. Or if you're, thinking about drafting a franchise quarterback, then maybe you do go the route of keeping Brian Dable, because it seems like this is the pathway, right? You look at Brian Flores with Miami and with Tua Tagovailoa. You look at Matt Eberflus with Chicago and with Caleb Williams. A lot of times when you draft a quarterback high in the draft, you tend to keep the previous head coach just to see what they could do for a year, just to see if they can maybe turn it around. And then if they don't have any success after that quarterback's rookie season, you end up moving on from that regime. So there is a world where they do that, but I just don't see Brian Dable and Joe Schoen, especially with the pathway that this, draft seems to be playing out already. I don't see them, really retaining their jobs, especially if they don't turn it around this season. So you hope for them that they have some sort of success when it comes to the rest of their schedule. It's not a brutal schedule. Like I said, you've got the Falcons and the Colts later on. But they got the Ravens this week.
Yeah.
So you lose 2-12.
Yeah.
It's not looking too pretty. So,
I see both sides.
Yeah.
I see both sides. I see why Giants fans want change, but I will just caution this. How many head coaches have you had come through the door since Tom Coughlin? Like, we can keep calling and calling and calling for guys to lose their job over and over and over again. But at some point, you got to get to the root of the issue. I'm not in love with any of the quarterbacks really in this year's draft class.
Yep.
There's a lot of smoke and mirrors with a lot of these guys, in my opinion. I don't know if any of them comes in and gets the job done. There are rumblings that the Giants, from people that I've talked to, kind of like Drew Lar. Like, for me, it's like this. I don't know, man. I don't know where you start. Like, you have to look at the GM to some degree for some of the decisions they have made, right? Letting Saquon Barkley walk out the door and go right up the road to your division rivals. Right down the road, I should say. Like, for me, I don't know. I don't know where the Giants go from here, personally. Yeah. But I don't think moving on from Brian Dable is the answer. Joe Schoen, that's another. Yeah. I don't feel like both of those two are two peas in a pot. Meaning, I don't think if you get rid of one, you get rid of the other. You have to get rid of the other. That being said, what do they have to work with? This is a full restart. This is going to be a full rebuild, so to speak, for the Giants. And I know that's not what guys like Malik Neighbors, guys that want to play for meaningful football in their career, guys like Dexter Lawrence want to hear. The one thing, listen, for me, whenever I analyze a team and I look through a team, I always look for what are their bright spots. What do they have to build upon? For me, if the Giants want to hang their hat on anything, they have a very strong defensive line.
Yep.
That is something that most teams around the league would kill for, would die for, because that defensive line will keep you in more games than you probably should be. They will. While you figure out the quarterback position, the defensive line will keep you in more games than you probably should be in. That's a building piece. That's a building piece. Do you want to know what I would do if I was in the New York Football Giants, Daniel? Yeah. Marissa, you want to know what I would do? I would entertain moving off of Dable. Personally, that's me. I don't think he necessarily deserves to get axed right away, but there's too good of a potential head coaching candidate out there for me to pass up. Not only that, the guy has New York ties. Not only that, the guy grew up in the Bronx. Not only that, the guy has been proven to have success as a head coach in the NFL. If you don't know who I'm talking about Brian Flores. B-Flow. To me, the opportunity to pair B-Flow up with that defensive line, and while we sort out the quarterback position, this might sound like a hot take, but I think with B-Flow as the head coach, the Giants could win 9 to 10 games next year, respectfully. Look what he's doing right now with the defense of the Minnesota Vikings. You think the Minnesota Vikings have more talent on defense than the Giants? Not I. I don't believe that. I think if you give Brian Flores, I know you're going from one Brian to the other, but if you give Brian Flores that defense, you're cooking. You're cooking. I think it'll be a change of the guard, because here's what I think would happen if you don't entertain that. I think some of these vets that have their entire career, they've never competed. They've never had the opportunity to compete for playoff football or championship level football. You're going to see a lot of these guys start to request out. Guys like Brian Burns, who you just traded for. Guys like Dexter Lawrence. What about Kayvon Thibodeau when his contract comes up? No one wants to play losing football consistently. I think B-Flow would get those guys back engaged. I think B-Flow would have the Giants with a top 5 defense next year. That's what I think. And then you go out there and you hire an offensive coordinator that you think can help you put some stuff together. Maybe you poach one of these offensive coordinators from a staff that is out, but the returns have been good. Because no matter which way you look at it, the defense is the side of the ball. Trying to force yourself to be an offensive juggernaut team when you don't have the pieces in place never works out. Right now, in my eyes, the Giants are a defensive football team. So why not hire a defensive coach? Why not hire a coach that could probably maximize and get the most out of this defense? Defense does win championships. Strong defenses can get it done. Because let me tell you what the key for the Giants is. Then what you can do is you can add a veteran bridge gap quarterback not named Drew Lock. You can draft a rookie quarterback for the future, maybe named Drew Alar. And you add a strong running back. I like some of the pieces on the Giants offensive line.
Mhm.
And then you almost Seattle Seahawk it. You marry the run game with the play action game and you predicate yourself on the defense getting you timely turnovers and stops. It's not a sexy brand of offense, but guess what? It gets the job done. Daniel, what say you?
I like that. I'm gonna be honest. I like that. I think that's a very good pull by you. I think that the Giants are a team where when you're looking at them, the biggest concern, like you said, you've got to start with obviously your culture in your locker room, but a lot of it does start of the search for your quarterback. And I really do. I'm with you. I don't know if I see first off Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders going to a New York.
No.
And then when you look at the rest of these guys at the top of the draft class, it really is just Cam Ward. And in my opinion, when you look at a guy like Cam Ward, I think you're going to go through your trial and error with him. It's almost like you go look at what the Colts, what's going on with them and Anthony Richardson. It's a lot of highs and it's a lot of lows. But the difference is with those two guys, Anthony Richardson a lot of times relies on his legs. And I think that that's something that's an X factor. That's not really Cam Ward. Cam Ward's got good legs. He's got, good size. He can run outside the pocket. But a lot of his plays, he's not running design quarterback runs. So it's like, all right, you're going to go draft a Cam Ward to be that mold of a Josh Allen. But I don't know if Cam Ward is as refined as even Josh Allen was heading into, the NFL. So I think that it really is a Cam Ward conversation for the New York Giants. Is that the guy you want to roll with? And if it is, you're keeping Brian Dable. I don't see a world where you go out and draft the Cam Ward and you fire Brian Dable because, Brian Dable had success with Josh Allen in Buffalo. So I really think it comes down to what is the future of this team? What do they want to do? Because I think if they're going to go draft a quarterback early in the first round, a Shedeur or a Cam Ward, I think very quickly we will know Brian Dable is staying his ass in New York. Because Cam Ward, his best possible chances to succeed, I think it is with the Brian Dable. But what's your best chance to have playoff success? What's your best chance to, continue to build a better culture than what you have? I think that Brian Flores is a good pull. And I think if they do move off of a Brian Dable, I think we're going to see them go with a bridge type quarterback. And the names floating around, obviously the Sam Darnolds of the world, but you got to look and say, hey, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, what's the situation over there? What's the temperature in Pittsburgh? So when I look at the New York Giants, I like the Brian Flores pool, and I think that they've got a clear decision, right? We're drafting Shedeur/Cam Ward, but mainly I think it's the Cam Ward conversation for the New York Giants. And if it's not Cam Ward early into the first round, then you're looking round two. You're looking at Quinn Ewers if he comes out of the draft. You're looking at Drew Alar if he comes, he will likely be a draft pick. So that's the conversation for the New York Giants. And I do think it depends on how the rest of the season plays out. And I would strongly entertain, if they do have a top 2 pick, trading down for somebody who wants Shedeur Sanders, getting some assets for next year, maybe getting a first round pick for next year, trading down to around 8, going out and getting, potentially build that offensive line. Hell, you can even continue to add to that defensive line, or you can add a star cornerback like Will Johnson. And then from there, you got resources for next year's draft. You bring in a new head coach, you go with the bridge quarterback, and you look to next year's draft to say, hey, we're going to go after one of those guys in the top 5. Or hell, we're going to go after, like I said, maybe it's Sam Darnold this year, and maybe you roll with him. So the Giants, they've got to check the temperature for the next 4 weeks of the season. And I think it's the Cam Ward conversation, or you would move off of Brian Dable for a guy like Brian Flores. And I like that pull, Malik.
Thank you, man. Every now and again, I'm able to pull a nice one out of my hat. I just think it makes sense for many obvious reasons. I got something even better for you.
Mm.
What if Brian Flores brought Sam Darnold with him?
I like that.
What if Brian Flores brought Sam Darnold with him? They obviously, no doubt, have a relationship like any defensive coordinator and his quarterback does, right? The Vikings aren't going to pick JJ McCarthy over Sam Darnold. They're not going to.
You mean the opposite?
Huh?
You mean they won't pick Sam Darnold?
Sam Darnold over, yeah.
You think
Sam
so?
Darnold.
Real quick, what
Yeah.
do you think's the likely? You think it's likely, because that's what I don't know, right? I'm playing with the two ideas. You think it's more likely that Darnold's gone and they roll with McCarthy?
Yeah,
next
I mean,
year, right?
he's a free agent. Darnold's a free agent. Darnold's going to be able to garner some serious attention on the free agent market, and I think that the quarterbacks, make a lot of sense. For I think Sam Darnold makes a lot of sense as a stopgap, bridge gap quarterback for the Giants as they figure out the quarterback position of the future. If you decide to go out there and draft a Drew Alar or whoever, well, that guy doesn't have to be rushed into a situation where he has to start right away. You have Sam Darnold, who played very, very well, right? Hell, they I have no idea, but you wonder who could Brian Flores, if he were to get the New York Giants job, if it came open, who would he pair with a Sam Darnold? Because ideally it would be somebody from that Minnesota Vikings coaching staff, because you would want to try to continue that success as much as possible. You would look to do that. I mean, I think it only makes sense. Who would you look to pair Sam Darnold with? Maybe you take the quarterbacks coach from Minnesota. I have no idea, but ideally you want to try to carry over as much of that success as possible to make sure that it can be replicated. And in the process, not only can that be replicated, will it be able to translate to whatever quarterback you decide to draft for your future? All right. Those are going to be the question. Now, the other question is, would Sam Darnold even want to come back to New York? We know he got drafted by the Jets. And, well, the Jets and Giants are both two organizations that have failed their quarterbacks as of recently. So would he want to entertain the New York market, the New York media again? Because it was a lot. It was hell on him. So would he entertain that? That's something that Sam Darnold would have to answer. But I think the fit makes a lot of sense there. And I think that if you put Sam Darnold as the quarterback of the New York Giants, you place Brian Flores as the head coach of the New York Giants with the defense already being in place, I think that we could really be talking about the Giants competing for the NFC East.
So the Vikings quarterbacks coach right now is Josh McCown, and he's been
rumored for offensive coordinator jobs.
I like that. And he's been a guy all over social media as well, right? You go and look with the time, I believe he was with Carolina when they had, the decision to go out and draft Bryce Young. And I think that that's where, it really starts for me. I like that. And it seems like that's a good pool for Brian Flores. Hey, wherever he goes, hey, I'm going to bring Josh McCown with me. This dude is known as, quote unquote, a quarterback's guru. He's been, like I said, doing film breakdowns for years on YouTube. And a lot of people really respect his knowledge, especially what he's, his idea for quarterbacks. And then, like I said, his time with Carolina, it seemed like he wasn't the biggest fan of Bryce Young. At times, he really liked CJ Stroud. And then, obviously, he got the opportunity to be the quarterbacks coach with Minnesota. And I think that he could be pulled away to be an offensive coordinator. I think that's a good pull as well. So,
yeah. The thing is, he has been looked at as for offensive coordinator jobs for the last couple of seasons. People thought that maybe he might get an opportunity to be an offensive coordinator, but I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. Let us know down in the comment section what you guys think. All right. Do you think that the Giants should try to remake this team with B-Flow, Sam Darnold, Josh McCown, or do you see another potential fit? Or maybe you're on the camp that you think Brian Dable deserves another shot. Let us know down in the comment section what you think. That's crazy. I've never changed my opinion during a show like this, but I literally just shifted my entire stance on it because it just connected for me.
Yeah.
Brian Flores to the Giants makes so much sense. The question is, here's the one question. Would the Maras hire Brian Flores? Because the Maras are very close with Bill Belichick. And Bill Belichick and Brian Flores had their falling out when Brian Flores went out there and tried to sue the league and all that stuff like that. Would they entertain that, or would they be like, no? That's going to be that would be the question. Would they entertain Brian Flores? But I think Brian Flores makes a lot of sense for a cut. I think he's just cut from that New York cloth. Yeah. And I think he can withstand whatever the New York media throws at him. That's just my thoughts. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Let's start talking about the Bengals for a second. And the question at the top of the show is the Bengals coaching staff safe? They rattled off a victory against the Dallas Cowboys. Kind of cooled people's opinions a little bit. People are like, "Whoa, see, you obviously had those people out there like, see, Zach Taylor is not the issue, bro, and all that kind of stuff like that." Winning cures all. Winning cures all. No doubt, unless there's an obvious head coaching candidate out there that maybe I don't see, is probably more likely than not, I think they lose, unless if they were to lose, get to 10 losses. I think it's more likely than not Zach Taylor's back as the head coach. But does that mean the remainder of the coaching staff is safe? Dan Pitcher has done a fantastic job this year, getting the most out of Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, elevating their game to another level. And no doubt that guy will get head coaching consideration. It would not shock me if some team out there hired Dan Pitcher as their head coach, by the way. This is a guy that has really earned his chops in the league. He's been with the Bengals organization longer than Zach Taylor. And he was back here. He was back on the staff when Marvin Lewis was there. And he really worked his way up to be in the position that he's in right now. And as it's going about as perfect as you could expect for a guy that has literally built his way through the entire organization. And then now he gets an opportunity to be a head coach. You look at it. I got to ask, man, your thought process, right? You got to put people you got to think, are people like Lou, who I think has an opportunity to save his job? Are people like Lou, Marion Hobby, Frank Pollock, are they safe? And the word safe is so fickle in the NFL. I mean, but we got to have that conversation to a degree. Like for me, I think that there's a real world in which the Bengals could, depending on what happens with Colorado, well, the Bengals could, try to bring back their old defensive backs coach, who's now Colorado's defensive coordinator. I mean, I think that there's a real shot here that we see some changes from positional level coaches. I do think the big change that the Bengals need to make would have to come within the front office, my thought process. But from a coaching staff perspective, what are your thoughts, Daniel?
I think that there's a lot of, when you look at this coaching staff, I think that the place to start, and it's weird, I do think Dan Pitcher is a beautiful place to start because he's a guy where he is not going to be looked at, and he's the one guy within the big three, quote unquote, what do we say, is for sure having a very good season. And I think that I'm with you. I think I struggle to see how they let go of a Dan Pitcher without, Zach Taylor being gone. And then the Zach Taylor conversation, I do think that it has cooled. And I think that we got to see how the rest of the season plays out. But this is a drastic shift from where we were literally 1 week ago before this game on Monday night. And when I look at who is safe necessarily, I really do, and I'm of the belief that it should be a package deal with these guys at this point. If we're talking about continuity, if we're talking about running it back with Zach Taylor, I think you've got to do the same thing with Lou Anarumo. And that's just how I look at it. I think it's very clear to everybody right now, hey, the Bengals are dealing with a lack of talent on defense. It's not only said within the organization, but it's also said on media, it's said on our show, it's said with fans, it's said from Pat McAfee, Bill Belichick has said it. So many people have alluded to, man, this defense, it's Trey Hendrickson and it's nothing else, or it's a lack of communication within the cornerbacks, or it's just a lot of moving parts with this defense. And then even something else, Malik, they've been without Logan Wilson for 2 weeks. And that's something that gets really put under the radar. This Bengals defense, especially, who is the guy wearing the green dye? Who is the one that's communicating with the rest of the defense? That is an integral part. And Jermaine Pratt, albeit he is a veteran, it is still new. There is still going to be growing pains, especially when you make that shift right away. So you got that. You got cornerbacks who are playing off of the practice squad and Marco Wilson. There's going to be a lot of miscommunication. And I think, like I said, the offense is performing at a crazy rate. But when you look at the defense, I think that the defense in Lou Anarumo, I think they deserve some grace. If we're going to give Zach Taylor that same grace, if we're saying, hey, Zach Taylor, you know what? You've done a poor job at the beginning of the season, but we don't see anybody else out there. We're not a huge fan of the Mike Vrabel trade. We're not a huge fan of the Ben Johnson trade. We don't know what to add to our team. Okay, if we're going about it that way, we're saying, hey, Zach Taylor, we're going to keep you here. We're going to keep you to, the end of the contract, or even just until next year. I think you got to do the same thing with Lou Anarumo because, and this is my philosophy as well, I'm going to wait until I see the players speaking out. I think that is a huge tell sign that you've lost the locker room, that it's time to move on from a coach. And we saw that early on in the season with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase slowly starting to say stuff about, kind of hinting that the offense isn't where they want it to be, that they want different play calls or so on and so forth. But I have yet to see a defensive player say something about Lou Anarumo. I haven't. And I think for me, that tells me a lot about what's going on with this Bengals team. So let's wait and see these next couple of weeks. But at this point, I really struggle to see how, you fire a Lou Anarumo without even Zach Taylor. And I think that if they were to, and this is my prediction, I think that it is a cop-out. And I think that it is you giving into the narrative of the media and you giving into what is being portrayed on social media. And I think that that's going to go against what the Bengals say they stand for, right? They say they stand for in-house, right? We're going to do what's best for our football team inside these four walls. Okay, if you're going to do that, then at least you should know that the Bengals defensive problems don't all align on Lou Anarumo. And on the flip side, like I said, if we're talking about Zach Taylor, is he safe? I think that nobody's safe these next 4 weeks. I think that we have to judge it after the season, but these next 4 weeks are going to be crucial. If you go and lose a game, let's say to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the end of the season, a Steelers team that, let's say, they're not even trying and they play their bench, that's a serious cause for concern. If you go 2-2, but if you run the table, Malik, there's a conversation that all these guys are safe.
Well, I think that the conversation within the organization needs to be very similar to a lot of these teams that happen. Like, you don't go into, let's say if they run the table, you don't go into the off season or into the off season after the season ends, right? And with the thought process that, oh, we're just going to keep the guy, we're going to move on from the guy. I would, if you are planning to keep Zach, or if there's an opportunity for Zach to save his job, I would have him try to come together with a comprehensive plan, including Lou, and talk about what went wrong and what you're going to do to get it fixed. Like for me, running a business, right? Got close to 45 employees. If something goes haywire, and somebody in a leadership position, we already know what went haywire. I want to know why it went haywire, right? But more importantly, what's important to me is figuring out what we're going to do to rebound, right? That's the important part. What are we going to do to fix the problem? And, it could be very similar to what happened with the Tennessee Titans and Mike Vrabel. Things didn't work out. They had a meeting with Mike Vrabel. They didn't go into the meeting expecting to fire Mike Vrabel, but answers didn't align with the vision and decided to move on. Those things can happen. It doesn't have to be this big old, it just didn't work out, blah, 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 blah. It could be a sit-down conversation. Most problems can be fixed with a conversation. You have a conversation and, you figure out what's the best pathway forward. Maybe that pathway forward is not working together, right? But then, like to Daniel's point, the next 4 weeks are critical. I don't think anybody saved their job after, after a victory against the Cowboys. I think that these are ongoing conversations that continue to happen, that need to continue to happen. For the Bengals organization, they need to have these conversations to feel good about the vision. Because then when they get that vision, they can communicate that vision properly to their fan base. I think it's just as simple as that. For me, I think everything should be considered personally. That's just my thought process. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Listen, there are rumblings going around the NBA that LeBron James and Jimmy Butler might be traded. I find that interesting. LeBron thing, again, it would be, if I was in AD's shoes, I'd be pretty pissed because, right, we're brothers, we're tag team partners here in this thing. And then it would just feel like LeBron's probably moving on to try to get a championship. But the Jimmy Butler thing for me, I don't know. I just feel like I don't know what team would want to take that on. He's been super inconsistent. The athleticism is definitely waning. Yeah. And this guy was given his team. He was giving his team the team that he wanted. He wanted the opportunity to be a lead man. He got that and just couldn't break through. So what do you do? Apparently the Warriors are a team that's interested. This is from Sean Mascherino, by the way. Apparently the Warriors are interested in him and LeBron. I want to get your overall thoughts on Jimmy Butler, right, and LeBron James, two guys that we grew up with watching, and they were such forces in the NBA in their prime. What do you think about them being on the potential trade block?
I think that the Butler stuff, first off, is hilarious. You go and see his agent, and then even Jimmy Butler commented on it. He said, "Oh, I love this," and I think that Jimmy's a troll. I think that that's what Jimmy is. Jimmy's having fun. Um, my only concern with the Jimmy Butler stuff is, like you said, what does it do for the other team? And that's where I would start with this conversation, as well as what am I willing to give up to get a Jimmy Butler on my team? I don't know what I'd be willing to give up. I think that Jimmy's fine. I think that Jimmy is a guy, he is a great culture guy, as of right now, at least. Jimmy is a guy, he will turn it up in the playoffs. But when we're just talking about overall consistency and what he's adding, I hate to say it, but he's almost just like kind of like a veteran presence at this point when we talk about during the regular season. This is a dude I think can confidently say can get you 25 a night come playoff time. I think that that's, a realistic expectation. That's maybe shooting high, but Jimmy is a guy, and you really have to look at the team. Like, if I'm the Golden State Warriors, what am I willing to give up to get Jimmy Butler? I don't know if I'm willing to give up more than just a Kuminga and a first round pick. Like, am I willing to give up Moses Moody? Like, sure, maybe, but am I giving up, Kuminga, Pods, and a first round pick? Hell no, I'm not. I think that Jimmy Butler is fine, but like I said, he's 35 years old. So what are we expecting out of Jimmy Butler?
Right.
So the Miami Heat, I think, have bigger fish to fry when it comes to the rest of the roster, like Tyler Hero, right? Let's have that conversation. Is Tyler Hero going to be your lead man when it comes to offense side of the ball? Okay. If he is, then we can entertain a Jimmy Butler trade. If you have a pathway without Jimmy Butler, with Jaime Jaquez, with Khalil Ware, if that's the route that you want to go, okay, maybe you could get, trade Jimmy Butler. But the same could be said about this Miami Heat locker room. They love Jimmy Butler. Bam Adebayo, huge fan. Eric Spoelstra, huge fan. The Miami Heat fan base, big fans of Jimmy Butler. So I think that it depends who wants to be their dance partner, because that's where I would start with the conversation. Who's willing to give up something for Jimmy Butler? And they need to be a younger team looking to be in championship contention, like a Houston Rockets. That's what I would look at, right? Houston Rockets are a team. They've got a bunch of these young dudes. You got Cam Whitmore. You got Jabari Smith. You got a bunch of these dudes. Maybe go and trade a couple of them for Jimmy Butler to get that championship pedigree in there. Pair him with a Dylan Brooks. So that's what I think about Jimmy Butler. LeBron James, I think that LeBron's got a lot going on right now. He's not playing today, out for personal reasons. I think that there is a lot of turmoil around this Los Angeles team. And I think that if we're talking about LeBron James being traded, I really think, and we talked about this before, there really is only a couple options for him. And if he's going to get traded, I think that it would have to happen, in my opinion. I think it would have to happen by this trade deadline, or it ain't going to happen. And maybe it could happen this offseason, sure. But if you're the Lakers, you need to figure this out now.
Yeah.
So the Golden State Warriors, right? We talked about this. This is really the spot if you're LeBron James, right? Where else could you go? Cleveland Cavaliers are obviously the other name, right? Go back home. But for me, from a legacy standpoint, from a LeBron James standpoint, what does that really do for you? You're chasing a championship, but you already finished your story there. Leave that be.
Mhm.
So if I'm LeBron James, I'm looking at Golden State Warriors. I'm looking at them saying, hey, I know for a fact that they would be dance partners with me. I know that they would want me on their team.
I wanted him last year.
And they wanted him last year. And Malik, they know what's coming up with Steph Curry. That hill is coming up quickly. They know Draymond Green is about to reach that point where maybe he's not, seeing 30 minutes a night. So if I'm the Warriors, time to strike is now. And I think that that's got to be the spot for LeBron James.
Yep, I agree. Keeping it on James, Bronny James dropped 30 points in the G League yesterday, and I know Danny was pretty fired up about that. And do you think Bronny James could be something in this league?
Yeah, man, I do. I do. I think that Bronny James could be really good. And let me preface that by saying really good. I think he could be a role player on a playoff contending team. And a role player is a guy off the bench just giving me 10 to 20 minutes a night. I think that he's got that in him. I don't think that he's going to be, a sixth man of the year. I don't think that he's going to be a 20-point a night scorer, but I think he could be a very solid role player when it comes to championship team. I think he's got the chops on defense, and for him, it really is, in my opinion, about confidence. And I think that honestly, that's what the NBA is about, right? You
Yeah.
look at all these dudes respectfully. These dudes could all step onto a college floor, onto any rec floor, and drop 50 on anybody. So what's the difference between the star players and the dudes on the bench who are shooting 30% a night? Because I promise you, there's dudes on the bench that can shoot 60% from 3 in practice. It's about confidence. And I think that Bronny James is developing that confidence, especially the fact that he dropped 30 as a rookie in a G League game for a dude who's everybody said this dude doesn't belong at USC. Well, shit, he belongs, and excuse my French, but he belongs as a quality basketball player. It really is about confidence now. So Bronny James, I think you got to develop him. We'll see what happens with LeBron James. I'm sure he'd be a part of that deal if LeBron gets dealt. But I really can see Bronny James as just
Bronny James is crazy.
as a quality role player and a dude that I think his mentality and his niche is going to be he's got to be a dog, and I think that that's what's going to get him
3 and D.
to. He's got to be that. He's got to be an
3.
energizer, and I think he could do that. To be honest with you,
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. Look how many guys have started off as role players. Guys like Derek White started off as role players, and they developed their skills, got better in the league, and they became something, right?
Yep.
And now Derek White was an integral part of the Boston Celtics winning the championship last year. And for me, I think being a solid role player is absolutely fine. Lou Dort is a solid role player, and his calling card is defense, right? He can provide some offense if you leave him open, and if you give him the shot, he can knock some shots down. I think Bronny James could be fine in the league. I just think he has to come up out of his dad's shadow a little bit. I think the rest of the league would be rooting for him a little bit more. You guys can do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or upload content. I want to talk about Colby Covington really quickly. Colby Covington, he's probably one of the more brash UFC fighters. He's now going after the UFC welterweight champion. And you got to think it's an effort to get a title shot if he's able to pull out a victory tomorrow night. Marissa, roll the clip.
How it got made, what made you accept a fight with Buckley, and the journey on how you got here.
Yeah, so I called the UFC when Bilal had a pager on his foot and he backed out because I guess the pager exploded on his ankle and messed up his toe, which is just weird. You guys need to ask Bilal, why is he wearing pagers around his ankle? It's just weird. But so he pulled out of the fight, so I called the UFC involved.
I think that this is just tired at this point.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is so forced, and I feel like everybody at this point knows what Colby Covington is and what Colby Covington is trying to do, right? There isn't any silencing Colby Covington. There isn't any, it's freedom of speech. He can say what he wants. But the fact of the matter is, it's such a failed, poor attempt. People know what you're trying to do at this point. You're trying to jump the line. You're trying to jump the Shavkat Rakhmonovs. You're trying to jump the Ian Garys, because you realize you're probably one of the least active welterweight fighters on the roster, if not the least, especially in the top 10. And you're trying to basically call your shot for a welterweight championship fight with the champion Bilal Muhammad. So you use tactics such as these. And I don't know. For me, I don't even think with a victory over a Joaquin Buckley, Colby Covington would be deserving of a shot. Nor do I think Bilal Muhammad would even take the bait and give him a shot. That's just my thought process. But it is a great way to get people to watch your fights. It is a great way. Maybe you can get that emotion out of Bilal Muhammad to where he says, Colby, I want to fight you, because Bilal Muhammad has said for years, I want to punch Colby Covington in the mouth when I see him.
Yeah.
So with a victory on Saturday night on short notice, would that be enough to get Colby Covington? Because he's going to get in the mic and say something if he wins. Would that be enough to get Colby Covington a shot against the champion Bilal Muhammad? Daniel, what say you?
I don't know. I think UFC so much is about timing, and it's about building up these fights. You look at Sean O'Malley, for example, right? Sean O'Malley is a guy where people are pissed off about him, right? Saying, hey, how did this dude deserve a title shot? What has he done? It's about storylines. And I think that Colby Covington, it depends. I think if he goes out and dominates Joaquin Buckley, if he goes out there and finishes him, I think that there's a world where he could, Malik. I'm going to be honest with you. I think that Covington is that brash of a personality, that, bold of a personality to where people gravitate towards or against it. But at the end of the day, everybody has an opinion about him, right? And I think that that's what the UFC needs right now. And that's what the UFC would be looking for with a fight, especially, like I said, if he goes out there and does something he hasn't done since 2020 and does something that he's done once since 2017, which was 7 years ago, and that's finish an opponent. If he goes out there and finishes Joaquin Buckley, I think we could be having that conversation. But is that likely? And I think that that's where the conversation is, Malik. I don't think so. He's likely going to go out there. If he wins, it's going to be a wrestle, back and forth victory. It's a 5-round fight. We're going to see 49 or 48, 47. We're going to see maybe he wins maybe he wins 4 out of 5 rounds. Okay. But is that going to be enough for him to get a title shot? I think he's got to go out there and win decisively. And I think if he wins decisively, the conversation can start, because at that point, we're going to be discussing, okay, who's next, right? We'll have the conversation. Ian Gary's got to get one more fight. Shavkat versus Bilal seems like that's the next fight. But there's a world where Colby Covington, like I said, could inject himself. But I think it has to come through his performance. I think that we've seen enough of the talking, enough of the brash personality to say, hey, that alone is not going to get you a title fight, right? But we saw his last fight against Leon Edwards, right? That was coming off of a decision win against Jorge Masvidal, who wasn't an impressive victory, but he got a title fight because he had a storyline with, Leon Edwards. And then we saw what happened in the press conference. He created a bigger story talking about Leon Edwards' family. So I think it's going to have to come with a finish and a dominant performance on Saturday night. And I just don't see that being likely, to be honest with you. So,
Yeah. Look, listen, I think that Colby's barking up the wrong tree, essentially trying to get that fight with Bilal Muhammad. I think he has a lot of work to do. I think the ideal fight for a Colby Covington, if he made it past Joaquin Buckley, would be an Ian Gary. I think Ian Gary versus Colby Covington, or Ian Gary versus a Leon Edwards is the ideal fight to make. Or hell, maybe you do Colby versus Leon too in London.
I
Maybe
like
you do
Ian
that.
Gary. I like the sound of that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a fight that Ian Gary begged for. He wanted the fight. And it was not a fight that Colby was the most interested in. And now maybe after seeing his performance against the Shavkat Rakhmonov, he would be.
That's the fight to make.
Yeah, I think Ian Gary would win that, though. But matter of fact, even with a loss, I think if Colby wants to have a quick turnaround, if he's not talking about retirement, which I have a hard time seeing that guy ever trying to be out of the limelight, I think Colby versus Ian Gary ideally is the next fight to make for a lot of reasons, unless you're giving Ian Gary Leon Edwards and his return. Whatever Ian Gary's next fight should be, it should be against the former champion or one of the former champions, whether that be a Kamaru Usman, right? Whether that be a Leon Edwards or whether that be a Colby Covington. We'll see what happens. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications. Daniel, I want to get to some of your favorite bets for tonight, as well as NFL for this week before we head out of here.
For sure. And I was actually even looking at like some of these UFC ones at some point. Obviously, they'll be on the Patreon. There were some good ones. I don't necessarily have a lean for some of these, but there's some good fights on this card. And I'd be excited to talk about those with you. Like one of our guys, Adrian Yanez, I really liked him. He's plus money against Daniel Marcos. That's one I don't know which way I'm leaning, but
That's a tough fight.
There's going to be some serious value.
That's a tough fight.
Yeah, there's going to be some serious value on this card. So make sure you guys go to that Patreon for our full best bets. NBA, it's a beautiful slate. We had a very good day yesterday when it came to a smaller slate. Cleveland Cavaliers are facing the Wizards. This is a matchup I've been circling all year long. Just target centers against the Wizards. It's simple. They got Jonas Valanciunas, but besides that, their interior is piss poor. And who's the center for the Cleveland Cavaliers? It's Jarrett Allen. So for me, I'm looking at Jarrett Allen. I like his rebounds, but I also like him just to get a double-double, as well as I'm going to parlay him to get 15 points and 10 rebounds. Super simple. Like I said, you look at what centers have done against the Wizards recently. Look at what Nikola Jokic did. Dude dropped 59 points in 35, 38 minutes against them. So I think that 15 points is very doable, especially in a matchup against the Wizards that is, once again, a piss poor defense against interior big men. I look at another matchup. I'm looking at the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Lakers are without their 2 primary ball handlers in LeBron James and Austin Reeves. What has been the system that worked for us all year last year? And I'll read off some of the numbers for you guys, but that's taking D'Angelo Russell against, teams when LeBron James is out. And look at what he's done without LeBron James. It's absurd. You can take his points, but I like looking at his assists and what he did last game. He dropped 14 assists in his last game without LeBron James. And when you look at it, what he's done without Bron, 10 assists, 14 assists, 8 assists, 9 assists, 7 assists, 10 assists. The dude is on fire when it comes to assists without LeBron James. His line's at 8.5. D'Angelo Russell's getting 10 plus assists tonight. That's plus money. And if I'm going for one more for NBA, I'm circling the Pacers versus the 76ers, and I'm going with Joel Embiid tonight. He's got a matchup against the Pacers where he has dominated time and time again. You look at the interior, Miles Turner is a fine weak side help defender, but he's not a dominant one-on-one defender. He's a dude who has consistently gotten foul trouble. And when I look at the matchup that I want to circle, it's got to be Joel Embiid, right? This is a team, they play at a slower pace. They play a lot of one-on-ones, and Joel Embiid in his last game, his first game back, I believe he had 25 to 30 points. His line right now is at 30 points. I think he drops a 30 ball tonight against the Indiana Pacers.
You cooked there, Daniel. Listen, there's a prop on this UFC card that I really, really like. It's a couple, and I don't really do this, but I'll do it here. Joel Alvarez to finish Drakkar Klose. The money line is just way too juice for me. But if you're taking Joel Alvarez, I would take him, double chance it on either FanDuel or DraftKings, whichever your respective sports book out there is. I would personally take him to finish him. I would. I think that you can get him at minus 160, whereas the money line is minus 420. I don't think that's right personally. But I do expect a finish on Joel Alvarez's side. As far as the Daniel Marcos versus Adrian Yanez fight, I actually have Daniel Marcos winning this fight. Daniel Marcos is 16-0. Yeah, he's 16-0. He's an absolute dog. He's finished a lot of these guys in here. I just think that the book is out on my guy Adrian Yanez. I think that Adrian is a crisp boxer. He's a guy that if you're willing to stand with him, he can light you up as well, but he's willing to take shots as well. I just don't think that that's a smart strategy for him against Daniel Marcos. I actually think Daniel Marcos is going to finish Adrian Yanez too. Daniel Marcos has very good leg kicks. Adrian Yanez has proven that he has no answer for leg kicks. And I think you can dismantle a lot of the things that Adrian will try to do. I think Daniel Marcos to win by KO or submission sitting at plus 170 is the route to go. I think Daniel Marcos finishes Adrian Yanez. I really, really believe that. Not only do I like that, and I'm kind of on a roll right now. So just I'm kind of giving out some gems right now. Sean Woodson.
Yes.
I would take Sean Woodson to beat Fernando Padilla. Listen, Sean Woodson is just a freakishly long, athletic guy for his weight class. And to be honest with you, he's a weight bully. He has no business making this weight. And I think he is going to beat up Fernando to the body. And I think he's going to finish him. I think even if you're looking, this could be a finish too here. Listen, I've seen Sean go the distance with people, but, I just don't know if, with Sean entering into his fighting prime, I think that he'll be able to get his opponent out of here this week. I'm trying to pull up right now what the odds would be for Sean Woodson to win this fight via, here it is right here. I've got it right here for you. If you put Sean Woodson to win by KO, TKO, or submission, it's plus 470. Sean Woodson to win by KO, TKO, or submission is plus 470. I think that's my favorite. I think that's one of my favorite bets.
Real quick though, just something to note. Padilla has gone to decision. He hasn't lost yet by KO, so it's up to you.
Yeah.
Sean
Woodson's a finisher.
Yeah.
Sean Woodson's a finisher. There will definitely be a moment in there where he staggers Padilla. And that's again, this is a step up for Padilla in a lot of ways. And Sean Woodson's been in there with a lot of guys, and Sean finds a way. And that's the thing. This guy can finish you on the feet, and he can finish you on the ground. He has good submission skills. I just don't think that, Sean talked about how he liked to be a little bit more active. He's not getting as many opportunities to fight as much as he'd like. I think he finishes Padilla, though.
Even his money line, minus 160 is not bad.
Yeah, I think he finishes him. Victor Petrino versus Dustin Jacoby. Again, the money line is juiced. Victor Petrino should win only because at this point, the age gap and just Jacoby looks like he's kind of like lost a step or two. I think that if you fight them in their prime, Dustin Jacoby wins this fight. I think that Victor Petrino is good, but I also think that he's beatable. Bully Quarantillo, I think he beats Cub Swanson. Ramon Tavares beats Davey Grant. I don't think he finishes him. I don't see him finishing Davey, but he could submit him. But one of my favorite bets on the card this week. By the way, Manel Kape is taking on Bruno Silva. That fight's going to decision. Manel Kape doesn't finish anyone, and Bruno Silva is very durable. Miles Johns. Miles Johns is plus 210 against Felipe Lima. Whatever reason, Vegas does not respect Miles Johns. They always make him an underdog or barely a favorite. Miles Johns is very talented. He's well-rounded everywhere. He has good striking. He has good takedown defense. He has good takedowns himself. I think it's Felipe Lima. I think he just wears on him. I think as long as Miles Johns is able to conserve his gas tank, because he always tends to burn out by the third round, I think he should win this fight pretty smoothly too. The fact that he's a plus 210, yeah, I think they've got this one wrong. Miles Johns wins this fight. And, if we're talking about the main event between Colby Covington taking on Joaquin Buckley, I've seen Colby melt too many guys, man. I know we're expecting Joaquin Buckley to just knock Colby Covington out and do what he always has done. But Colby's going to wrestle Joaquin, man. Joaquin's going to have to be ready to be wrestled because Colby's cardio is insane, man. And Colby has been rocked. We have seen Colby get rocked by Jorge Masvidal. We have seen Colby get rocked by Kamaru Usman. We have seen Colby rocked by Leon Edwards. Like, we've seen it before. I just think that his ability, his chain wrestling is going to be a little bit too much for Joaquin Buckley in this fight. So in this fight, I think I'm going to go with Colby Covington to win via decision. Colby doesn't really offer much from a KO or submission perspective, but I do believe he will beat on Joaquin Buckley if he's able to start to drown him and melt him over the course of 5 rounds. I think this is a fight where all the weight, all the muscle mass of a Joaquin Buckley is actually going to play a huge role and not in a positive way for him. So again, if you want all of our plays, you want all of our detailed picks, make sure you guys head on over to the TWSN Patreon. The QR code is right above me. We appreciate you guys so much for making us a part of your daily routine, your daily morning routine. As I announced before, we will not be doing a morning show next week. We will be away in Florida, but we appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. We'll be trying to get a State of the Jungle in, I think Friday. We were talking about doing a Friday episode live special edition of State of the Jungle at 7 p.m. So we will we will still be doing the recap show on Sunday. So we will definitely have some content for you guys this week. We appreciate you guys again so much for making us part of your daily routine and waking up, talking sports, and having the conversation. Remember, there's only one way you should be waking up, talking sports, having the conversation, getting into all things NFL, NBA, UFC, and that is the right way. We look forward to seeing you guys when we are back. We'll see you soon.
All they ever do is win, so kick that, relax.